Tonight on Ukraine Today, Russia's war, the fourth anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russian occupying forces. Total mobilization. How likely is the Kremlin to take this step, and how could it change the battlefield? American pressure. According to Bloomberg, Donald Trump wants to reach a deal to stop Russia's war against Ukraine by the 4th of July. A new enemy of Russia, Moscow, openly threatens Seoul because of military support for Ukraine. All that and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, like this video, and let's begin. Today marks 4 years since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For 4 years in a row, the army of occupiers has been trying to take Kyiv in 3 days.
2-3 weeks and it was all supposed to be over. As a result, today, February 24th, 2026, marks exactly 4 years since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Kremlin occupation forces.
I have made the decision to conduct a special military operation.
This war has become the bloodiest and most destructive in the history of Russia and Ukraine since the end of World War II. In 4 years, the Russian Federation has lost more people than in all the wars and conflicts throughout the existence of the aggressor country combined. And with each passing year, the number of Russians killed and maimed in Ukraine only continues to grow. And the territories seized by the Kremlin are incomparably small compared to the losses in manpower. Despite the fact that in 2025 they managed to mobilize and conscript 406,000 people into military service, their total losses, including those killed and wounded, amounted to about 418,000 soldiers. The year 2025 became the first time during the entire war when the losses of the Russian army exceeded the number of new recruits. Losses are increasing while the amount of captured territory is only decreasing. Throughout the entire past year, the Kremlin captured less than 1% of Ukraine's territory. And in just the incomplete month of February 2026, the Ukrainian armed forces have already reclaimed more than 300 square kilometers.
Things are not going so smoothly for the Russians. They are facing serious resistance from the armed forces of Ukraine and are even encountering situations where the Ukrainian military in turn is launching offensive operations.
Since February 2022, Russia has managed to inflict significant damage on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. This winter has been the coldest and darkest for Ukrainians, but it did not break them. In turn, Ukraine has also carried out massive strikes on Russian energy facilities. From Belgorod to Smolensk, Russians have also experienced what blackouts are like.
Oh, they're bombing us, right? Are we being bombed?
I don't know.
Just last year, at least 25 out of 38 of Russia's largest energy facilities were damaged by Ukrainian drones. In addition, the cold winter revealed that Russia's public utilities are in terrible condition. And all the money goes only to the war, not to repairs.
A monstrous underinvestment in public utilities. We have a monstrous underinvestment in all energy sectors. That is, periodically, when accidents occur in some settlements, it suddenly turns out that there is either a heating plant that hasn't been repaired since Soviet times or something else like that.
To repair public utilities, about 10 trillion rubles need to be invested in Russian infrastructure. That's exactly how much the Kremlin spent on financing the war in Ukraine in 2025. Russians have also started to feel that they are the ones paying for the war in Ukraine as prices in Russia have begun to skyrocket.
Well, friends, we're starting the new year 2026. With what? That's right, so my husband went to the store. How much do you think all of this cost? 3,000, three grand.
Have you even seen this? At Obus now, even chocolate is hidden in these kinds of cases because the prices have just shot up to the sky, already 139 rubles. People are being forced to steal.
At the end of September last year, Russia's finance minister Silvanov explained the increase of VAT from 20 to 22% as a measure to fight inflation. Well, and after the new VAT was introduced, he stated directly, all Russians must pay for the war in Ukraine.
We need additional spending on defense and security. Today, this is the primary task of our country. And in order to provide the necessary resources, yes, we are also changing the value-added tax.
It will take at least 2 or 3 years to make up for those lost years when, well, all resources were simply pulled out of the civilian sector. Once again, people don't buy tanks, people don't buy missiles, but that's exactly what's being produced. Naturally, prices are rising for things that are not being produced.
International sanctions and the ban on the sale of hydrocarbons, strikes on the oil refining industry, budget deficits, rising prices, colossal losses of the male population, as well as the increase in banditry from the so-called returning heroes of the special military operation. This is by no means a complete list of the problems that Russia has faced after attacking Ukraine. In response, starting from 2014, Russia occupied less than 20% of Ukraine's territory, becoming a global pariah.
Here is just one of many examples of what the so-called Russian world really brings. 3 people, including a child, were wounded in a Russian strike on Zaporizhzhia. An apartment building was damaged, as well as infrastructure facilities. And here are the consequences of this war felt inside the terrorist state itself. In Russia's Republic of Tatarstan, air raid sirens have been sounding for a second day in a row. Local media report a drone attack. Since yesterday, the Kaleykino oil pumping station has been burning. Since the beginning of the year, Ukraine's defense forces have restored control over 400 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory and 8 settlements in the south of the country. More details on the battlefield situation next.
And then 100 meters further on.
Kind drones in Tatarstan. The Kaleykino oil pumping station is in the crosshairs. These shots show the combat operations of military scouts on the Zaporizhzhia front. Direct firefights with the enemy, destruction of infantry and shelters, interception of enemy drones in the sky.
Across several specific sectors of the front, we are strategically repositioning our existing reserves, while in other locations we are systematically strengthening our units with entirely new combat formations or fresh reserves.
Russia has not changed its tactics on the Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, Kherson and Kharkiv fronts. There is no enemy advance in the Sumy direction. We are working to prevent an escalation in the Chernihiv direction, says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
The guys have now found a gap in the enemy's defenses, carried out counter-offensive actions, and liberated 8 settlements. They have liberated almost 300 square kilometers in the direction of Dnipropetrovsk in the Pokrovsk direction. That's it. They successfully pushed the troops of the Russian Federation much further away from the Dnipropetrovsk region, so that there would be significantly fewer casualties among the local population, primarily because their drones were constantly reaching and striking critical infrastructure as well as civilian vehicles.
According to the president, since December, the armed forces of Ukraine have been eliminating 30 to 35,000 Russian servicemen per month, while Russia is mobilizing 40 to 44,000. 1 kilometer of enemy advance costs approximately 157 killed. Putin has already started World War III, and the only thing that can stop the aggressor country is military and economic pressure, President Zelensky emphasized.
It was not our president of Ukraine who wrote those 28 points and then ran to Trump to ask for a truce. But it was actually Putin who wrote those 28 points, the way he sees them, and then ran to Trump so that he would try to pressure Ukraine into signing a truce. A truce with the Russian Federation from Ukraine's side can only come from the position of a strong state, not from the position of a beaten sheep, or a state that will beg and be ready to give up our territories to the Russian Federation, but from the position of a strong state, and only with the support, unfortunately, of Europe and our American partners will we be able to push this situation through.
Ukraine wants to see the support of partner military contingents on the front line of defense, not in relatively safe cities in the west of the country.
If anyone thinks that the war will end in half a year or in 2 or 3 months, in my opinion, the war will probably last for up to 2 more years for sure. Because, unfortunately, our partners are conducting a very sluggish policy towards Russia. Today they have one policy, tomorrow they revise it, especially our American President Trump.
Another confirmation of the inhumane treatment of Russian army soldiers appears in a new interception by Ukrainian military intelligence.
Did you even hear the commander's order over the radio? I heard it.
Why do all these ridiculous assaults happen? Because they're forced to go in one direction at gunpoint.
The Russian command doesn't even ask why their soldiers are left out in the open without food or water. They call for shooting the legs of those who refuse to follow criminal orders.
Over the past day, Russia lost at least 920 occupiers killed and wounded. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, that is already 1,261,420 invaders. In the last 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces also destroyed 2 Russian tanks, 4 armored combat vehicles, 50 artillery systems, and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. Kremlin propaganda is spreading disinformation, claiming that Britain and France are allegedly working to provide Ukraine with nuclear weapons. This comes amid reports that Vladimir Putin may officially announce mobilization in Russia. What a strange coincidence, right? By the way, if Russia is supposedly interested in peace, why would it need total mobilization? I dare to suggest it is not for defense. It is for expanding aggression. Western countries must stop Putin, not try to please him. That's what Volodymyr Zelensky said in an interview with BBC. Details in the report.
In the coming weeks, they may meet face-to-face. Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin are preparing to sit down at the negotiating table together.
We have reduced everything to a single question, and we have discussed various options for resolving it. That means it can be solved. So if both sides want to resolve this issue, we will resolve it.
However, the US President's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is clearly being disingenuous about the goals and problems. Each side in the negotiations has far more at stake. And when it comes to the issue of a ceasefire, Kyiv and Moscow are approaching it from completely opposite sides. As for Volodymyr Zelensky, he outlined his vision for ending the hostilities in a major interview with the BBC that was released the day before.
Today, stopping Putin and not allowing him to occupy Ukraine. That is a victory for peace.
According to the Ukrainian leader, Putin will never agree to a complete ceasefire voluntarily. For the bunker dweller, a ceasefire is a forced measure since the occupier's army has exhausted all its resources and could collapse at any moment.
I believe that for Putin, he needs this pause. He also needs this pause. That's true. No matter what he says, that's true. And when he recovers, our European partners say it will take 3 to 5 years. In my opinion, he will be able to recover in a couple of years, no more. So where he will go next, we don't know. But the fact that he will want to continue...
Putin himself does not really hide his plans to continue the so-called special military operation. Even though the man in the bunker doesn't give interviews, he does occasionally appear in front of the cameras. And at every opportunity, he reminds Russians that the war will be long, exhausting, and increasingly bloody.
You know, when everything is calm, measured, and stable here, we get bored. It's stagnation. We want some action.
But as soon as the action starts, everyone freaks out.
And seconds and bullets, unfortunately, bullets are whistling now. So we're scared. It's terrifying, terrifying. Well, it's just awful. And
Putin doesn't even hide the fact that he's doing everything to make this horror settle in every Russian family.
we don't consider ourselves responsible for the deaths of people because we didn't start this war.
Instead of focusing on peaceful negotiations, the Kremlin is pouring all state resources into the military-industrial complex.
The stable and steady operation of the defense industry, including the fulfillment of export contracts, became possible largely thanks to timely government support measures.
And while Donald Trump is fantasizing about yet another peace agreement with Russia, in Moscow they are actively recruiting new allies until the summer of 2026.
New opportunities are opening up to deepen military technical cooperation with countries from other regions of the world, including states on the African continent.
In the poorest African countries, Putin is counting on massively recruiting cannon fodder in the future to continue the war.
According to the plan for 2026, which we will finalize and approve today, the volume of military exports should increase significantly.
All this indicates that the Kremlin is not just preparing for World War III. Putin has already started it. I
believe that Putin has already started it. The question is how much territory he can seize. And the question is how to stop him, not so that Russia doesn't win. Russia wants to bring its own world and change life for people in a way that they like.
The Russian dictator is pushing the same message openly from the podium to the masses, only in different packaging. Supposedly, enemies are everywhere, imposing on Russians an alien way of life with centralized water supply and indoor toilets, and also gas heating, electricity and democracy.
Their unification was based on completely different principles. They were united by the desire for profit, the desire to snatch something from us, to conquer, destroy, and seize. And we were united by aspiration, to preserve everything, our common land, our families, our culture, our traditions.
How Putin and his generals preserve land, culture and traditions is clearly visible in the example of Ukrainian cities wiped off the face of the earth by Russian liberators.
This is very important, this is good, and it needs to be supported.
It turns out that while Volodymyr Zelensky is doing everything he can to achieve real peace, Putin and his generals are doing everything possible just to keep the war going. That's why Western countries should firmly put a stop to the Kremlin's demands instead of trying to appease the man in the bunker.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism, so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it, so more people can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. A peace deal by the 4th of July. According to Bloomberg, Donald Trump wants to end Russia's war against Ukraine by the 220th anniversary of US independence. The publication writes that Washington's diplomatic efforts are running into unrealistic demands from Moscow. The Kremlin insists on control over Ukrainian territories and over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine is ready to stop the war along the current front line, but not to withdraw troops from Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Today in Kiev, a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing will take place, along with the Ukraine, Nordic and Baltic States Summit. Leaders of Estonia, Latvia, Iceland, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway and Croatia have already arrived in the Ukrainian capital. Also in Kiev are President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. A bit more about friends and partners. Jerusalem will transfer 117 mobile generators to Kyiv. This was agreed by Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar and Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha. The generators are expected to arrive in Ukraine in the coming days. Meanwhile, Slovakia is stopping emergency electricity supplies to Ukraine. This was announced by Prime Minister Robert Fico. According to him, this is a response to the halt of Russian oil transit through the Druzhba pipeline. Fico stressed that even if Ukraine requests assistance to stabilize its energy system, support will not be provided. Let me remind you, in January, Russians damaged the Druzhba pipeline during a drone attack. And finally, about Russia's new enemy. Moscow openly threatens Seoul. The so-called spokesperson of the so-called Russia's foreign ministry, Maria Zakharova, officially stated that Russia will take retaliatory steps if South Korea joins military support for Ukraine. Details next.
The press drunkard of the Russian foreign ministry is once again in the spotlight.
Well, this is really something, a freak show.
Zakharova has moved on to making threats against the South Korean side. In the event that Seoul joins the NATO program for financing the purchase of American weapons for the Ukrainian army,
any possible participation by the Republic of Korea in such deliveries in any form, direct or indirect, will only push back the prospects for resolving the conflict. In that case, we will be forced to exercise our right to take retaliatory, including asymmetric measures.
Zakharova's jab at Korea, which once again emphasizes whom they support in this war, is quite logical and aligns with the main propaganda line that exists in the Russian Federation. But at the same time, all these threats sound rather ridiculous because we understand Russia's capabilities on the international stage are quite limited. Basically, all the resources that Putin has, he has thrown into the war with Ukraine.
On the eve, South Korean media, citing diplomatic sources, reported that Seoul is considering various options for supporting Kyiv. Among the mechanisms being discussed is the possible participation in the Pearl Initiative, which involves purchasing weapons from the United States for subsequent transfer to the Ukrainian side. At the same time, the South Korean Foreign Ministry noted that most likely the authorities will limit themselves to purchasing non-lethal equipment.
Ukraine has repeatedly appealed to Seoul, which is one of the main players in the global arms market, with requests for assistance. But it has never received a positive response, mainly due to the various ongoing security concerns that have continually arisen for South Korea. Thank you very much for your time. The latest news about the desire to join the Pure L initiative. Indeed, these developments are in many ways revolutionary and unexpected, even though Ukraine and South Korea are in principle in the same camp of allies.
Since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Seoul has provided Kyiv only with non-lethal and other humanitarian aid, despite the fact that North Korea has sent thousands of its soldiers to the Kremlin, as well as millions of artillery shells, missiles, and heavy equipment.
The government in Moscow supports the cannibalistic regime of North Korea at every possible opportunity it finds, which is such a stark and blatant opposition to all the diplomatic and peaceful initiatives that currently exist in the south of this peninsula. And this stance continues to undermine regional stability.
On the eve of the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a large banner with an inscription in Russian appeared on the building of the Russian embassy in Seoul. "Victory will be ours." The South Korean government requested its removal, but the Russian side refused.
Russia is trying by all available means to spread its propaganda and impose narratives that benefit the Kremlin. And this kind of silly kitsch with the banner on the Russian embassy, it obviously stands out to any civilized tourist or resident of Seoul. So it's a completely logical demand from the South Korea will be perceived by Russia as an unfriendly move, but at the same time, South Korea itself understands very clearly what stakes Moscow is placing in the region. And all of them, of course, serve Pyongyang's interests.
North Korea is one of the few countries where the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin can travel without fearing arrest. Moscow secured military support from Pyongyang when it realized that it would not be able to defeat Ukraine. According to intelligence estimates, around 14,000 North Korean soldiers may have been sent to Russia, a significant number of whom have already been killed. And North Korea continues to supply weapons to Moscow.
The period of instability that we are all experiencing today also has a direct impact on the region, which appears to be one of the most explosive in the world, probably on par with the Middle East. Well, and because of this, it is obvious that it is increasingly evident that North Korea, having successfully secured the robust strategic support of the Russian Federation while maintaining quite clear and deeply understandable diplomatic relations with China, now feels significantly more empowered to exert a growing amount of aggressive pressure and military posturing on its southern neighbors across the peninsula.
North Korea and China are the most significant supporters of Russia's war against Ukraine. They supply Moscow with electronics and technologies for the production of missiles, drones, and tanks, as well as artillery shells. In return, the Kremlin shares with them technologies that allow them to develop their missile and nuclear programs.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Like, subscribe, comment, share. And see you next time.